price you pay to pursue your dreams. Grinding every day to get that dream. Ain't no holding back until you get your shot. One day you're gonna open your eyes and be on top. That's the price you pay to pursue your dreams. Grinding every day to get that dream. Ain't no holding back until you get your shot. One day you're gonna open your eyes and be on top. Been playing this game since I was 10 years of age. I wanted to make my mark ever since my Pop Warner days. When I strapped that helmet, I'm knocking dudes into a blaze. A lockdown corner going all the way through 7th and 8th grade. Entering high school, I'm ready to write another page. Busting my ass and lifting weights. It's a much higher level, but I'm still making plays. No time to party or bask in my glory days. It's college preparatory classes every single day. Living my life with that singular goal. It's the fire inside that makes me whole. Looking in the mirror, my muscles swole. I'm on a mission, and I'm never gonna stop. When the ball's in the air like Sherman, I'm a hawk. And I promise I'll overcome whatever life throws at me. All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Ageless Movement Podcast. I'm your co-host, Scott Lohman.
I'm Sam Plumnack.
All right, today we're going to cover something really important that was actually a part of my thesis so many years ago when I was in grad school. We're talking way back, all the way back, you know what I mean? Way back to the early days, 2002. So, 2002, the summer of 2002, I completed my master's in gerontology. My area of emphasis, of course, was fitness and aging. And a big part of my field study, my thesis, was loss of muscle mass and preventing it. That's what we're going to talk about today. How does one prevent loss of muscle mass? And what does it really mean? We're going to first define what it is, not just from a physicality standpoint, but from a physiological standpoint. What are all the factors behind it first? And then we're going to explore what can be done about it to prevent it and maybe increase your muscle mass. Okay, so pretty interesting stuff here. This is an article from Tufts, thank you. Tufts is a great medical school. All right, basically sarcopenia comes from the Greek word sarco, meaning flesh, and penia referring to deficiency or poverty of. But it starts as early as 30, and I was talking about this before. Some of the research I did in my thesis came from a doctor named Ro DeBrizo, and a lot of her research had shown that women achieve maximal muscle mass by 18, men achieve maximal muscle mass by 25, and that women sort of precipitously fall into their 20s and 30s, whereas men tend to slip towards retirement. But some of the more modern data shows something, a little bit different picture here. Poor diet is a major risk factor as well, and of course hormonal reasons. Now, a team of scientists who studied the role of physical activity and diet on sarcopenia at the Gene Mayer USDA Human Nutrition Research Center on Aging at Tufts University. Every day I'm struck by this condition and how it affects patients. Not only can sarcopenia lead to falls, it can also lead to isolation resulting from falls, which can have a cascade of negative consequences on older people. This is yet another example of the devastation caused by the pandemic, because so many people now aren't actually working out as much as they were. And of course, it really has to do with what region you are in the country. But either way, whether or not your community is closed up or not, doesn't dictate whether people feel comfortable enough, safe enough to show up to a public place like a gym. Sarcopenia is not a unique time during the coronavirus, and this is very good research that's actually came up with, because there's a lot more current research about sarcopenia during the time of the pandemic in which we're living now, which I think is more relevant to today. When people lose muscle mass, it is replaced by fat, fibrous tissue, resulting in muscles that look like marbled steak. Makes you wonder about the steak we used to eat.
Well, this fibrous tissue is actually one of those things that we talk a lot about in class, because a lot of our students have different myofascial issues, and we only get to address it if they bring it up.
Yeah, that is true.
We've tried a handful of times to we're going to be more regular about it, but we normally only address it when somebody brings it up.
Yeah.
So, but this should be part of a regular routine, is to break up the fibrous tissue so that that's not the issue, and you can, the other thing is how you develop the muscle. So this is why I always talk about alignment, because if you're not aligned properly, it makes it really hard to basically develop the correct muscles and use them properly if the alignment is off.
Yeah. Okay, researchers estimate that generally those between the ages of 60 and 70 have lost 12% of their muscle mass, with those over 80 having lost 30%. Now, I'm not surprised by any of this research. It actually describes both our parents quite well. I'm sure my poor father has lost 30% of his muscle. I know your father's now in a wheelchair, essentially.
Yeah.
My dad's so hunched over, he can't even stand up straight. And that, no doubt, had to do with the loss of muscle mass in his posterior chain. Okay, now, preserving your muscle mass, to me, this was always a primary objective to my own personal training. And just to give you some context to everything, when I retired from football, I played a rather speed-style position on defense. I was not a very heavy football player. I think I weighed 145 pounds my senior year of high school. It was a very muscular 145 pounds, but I was almost this height and that weight. I think I was 5'10 and a half. Now I'm just under 6 feet. And at one point, I think I'd gotten 70 pounds heavier than I was in high school. I think my heaviest I ever was around 215. That was kind of like a big muscular version of me with a layer of fat over me. When I was lean during that time, like when I competed in bodybuilding contests, my weight would get down to like 190. So just for some context, you end up losing when you get to be a larger athlete like that and you compete in bodybuilding. They want you really lean and shredded. I dropped anywhere from 20 to 25 pounds over the course of maybe 3.5 months. I would take my time, try to keep as much muscle as possible. So just to give you some, background, that was always a primary objective of mine, was to not just preserve muscle mass, but try to build as much as you can, because think of it as a bank, like reaching critical mass before retiring. It's the same kind of thing with muscle mass. You want to reach that critical mass and be able to lean on that as you get older.
But this is an issue that we address a lot in a lot of our classes, because I have a very similar mentality, just less of the reasons I think Scott has. Like, I didn't bodybuild or any of that. I was a desk worker, and I had to basically find a way to change my lifestyle. And so, like, all the weights I lift are within, essentially lifting weight. My main goal was to be able to lift my mom if I ever had to do it, because my mom had Parkinson's and was falling quite a bit. And I knew my dad, who's in his 90s, was not going to be able to do that. And I thought I might potentially have to move back. So how am I going to lift a woman who was literally 1.5 times my weight? And that was actually the requirement for my barbell certification.
RKC,
So it worked out perfectly that the requirement was to lift exactly what I would have to lift if I were to move back home. So every time I lift weights, it's within what I feel like I should be able to do. And, what does that mean for groceries and so forth? And that's, for me, has always been the biggest challenge, especially working with women, is trying to get them to lift more than 10 pounds, 15 pounds, because so many times I've seen them walk into the gym and their handbags are way bigger than the weights that they lift. So it doesn't equate as to, why are you lifting weight that's a fraction of what you have to lift in everyday life?
Yeah, I noticed that myself. And people would always ask me, how much do you lift, Scott, when you work out? My students ask that all the time. And I always try to get the point across to them. Look, I don't stand there and hold on to my dumbbells for a whole entire hour. I set them down in between sets. And what does that mean? So essentially, the amount of weight that you lift is dictated by the specific movement you're doing. So if I'm doing, say, laying on my back doing a dumbbell press, like a bench press, I can lift a tremendous amount of weight that way. I'm certainly not going to hang on to 110 or 120 pound dumbbells in my hand for the whole entire hour. That's just for pressing. So like when I do an overhead press, that's less weight. That's about 65 pounds at the most, 60, right? If I'm doing a dumbbell row, that may be heavier. If I'm doing, what else would I do with dumbbells that's typical? Okay, maybe a curl. That could be as much as 45 pounds. Another thing I could be doing, a tricep kickback, that could be as much as 40, 45 pounds. It all, strictly is decided by what you're doing. If I'm doing walking lunges, I'm probably not going to hold more than 45 or 50 pounds. And then if I want to do farmer carries where I hang on to weight and walk, I generally don't use dumbbells. I'll use a trap bar. That way I can put more weight on it. It's a little more ergonomical to hang on to and pull off the ground. And that's my point. You choose your equipment based on the movement that you're doing. And same thing with barbells. Nobody picks up a barbell and hangs onto it for an hour. You set it down. So the reason why we mention, when people would ask me, how much do you lift? It's always contingent on the movement that we're going to be executing. And that's what dictates the weight. So back to what you were saying, I remind my students all the time, you're holding 5 or 6 pound dumbbells, but if you have to lift your 30-pound suitcase overhead in a storage compartment on a plane, guess what? You're not training yourself for that. You need to train yourself for that. Why is that? Because you don't want to injure yourself the day you do have to press that overhead. You want to know how to load the shoulders properly. Shoulder packing is saying refers to it as. Loading your spine properly, aligning yourself when you lift weight. That's all important. Now, some of our students are wise guys and wise girls, and they'll say things like, well, I'll just have so-and-so lift it for me. Well, it's not always the case. Yeah. You can't always expect someone to lift something for you, especially if you don't have a caregiver with you.
Right. And so that comes down to, if you're willing to pay for a caregiver 24/7, then you can do whatever you'd like. But we'd like to think that ourselves and everybody else would like to be as independent as possible.
Yeah, definitely.
And to be the best version of themselves as possible. So when we speak about these things, that's what our intent is that you're trying to get to your best self, whatever that is. I have no idea. I can only work within the realm of what my clients would like to have happen, but...
I've always felt that way my whole entire life and everything I've ever done.
Yep.
Even in auto racing, I do. I don't care so much that I won the race by 1 second or whatever.
Right.
The real question is, how did I drive?
Yeah.
Did I improve? Did I stay the same? Did I get worse? And if maybe I won because the other drivers were just had a bad day or the cars were slower, I don't feel like, I really did it today. However, sometimes, you race somebody, has a bigger budget, more experience, faster car, and you're this close behind them. Sometimes I'm actually more impressed with that performance than I am when I dominate. And it's the same thing, whether it was football, if I had a receiver to cover that I knew was a better athlete than me, and I pretty much kept him in check all game long, I'm happy.
Yeah.
That's how you got to look at it. And just because you had a great game against somebody you knew wasn't as good an athlete as you, so what?
Yeah.
You gotta be willing to push yourself every day to get better. To me, every day you wake up is an opportunity to be a better version of yourself.
Yeah, and I know, for me, every now and then when I don't get up and do something, to me, that's lost time. And I think, I don't know who said it, but basically our greatest resource is time. You can't remanufacture it. So once it's gone, it's gone. And that's why, if you have the opportunity to train and you have the ability, be grateful and take advantage of it is
Fully.
The way I think of it. Because, you don't know when you might potentially lose those days. So you've just got to make the best of all the days that you can show up for.
Life is very fragile. I remember going from the greatest shape of my life to being fully disabled for about 3 months.
Yep.
So it can happen to anyone.
Yeah. And so the other thing about this whole pandemic is, now with the gyms not being open and we're not able to meet, I have all of my clients are lifting a fraction of what they used to lift.
Yeah.
And now, we're kind of dealing with the ramification of not being as strong as they used to be. And I'm pretty sure going through this whole process because of not having the same amount of muscle mass.
Yeah, fortunately for myself, my clients have been coming in.
They come in.
That really has not been a problem.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is training online versus training in person.
Yeah, I know. I had to do that with a couple clients early on too, and it was very tough.
Yeah.
because they're not as motivated. They're sitting at home all the time.
And nobody has the ability to even, I mean, it doesn't, the market actually didn't even have the amount of weights available for people to buy.
They really
I'm
did
still
not.
trying to buy something from March of last year. I'm like on the wait list and I'm still waiting for
crazy,
it.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a nice article here from Harvard Health Publishing. I really encourage you all to read a lot of these medical journals. They're very easy to read. You don't have to be somebody who's as versed in physiology as Sang and I is to actually to read and disseminate this information. They make it very simple for the public. And like I've said in the past, you don't need to listen to your favorite news person to get this information. Get this information yourself. Okay, age-related muscle mass, called sarcopenia, is a natural part of aging. So you are going to lose some muscle mass over time. It's inevitable. After age 30, you begin to lose as much as 3 to 5% per decade. Now, that doesn't mean everyone. That's just on average. That's people that aren't as disciplined and in the gym as much as you potentially could be. Most men will lose about 30% of their muscle mass during their lifetimes. And we just mentioned that we can clearly see the loss of muscle mass in both of our fathers at this point. Okay, what does it really mean? What are the ramifications of less muscle? Because some people say, okay, so I don't look as muscular now as I did when I was younger. Well, there's real problems that go along with it. Number one is lean muscle mass means less muscle mass means greater weakness and less mobility, both of which may increase your risk of falls and fractures. And that's where so many people spiral downwards. A 2015 report from the American Society for Bone and Mineral Research found that people with sarcopenia had 2.3 times the risk of having a low trauma fracture from a fall, such as a broken hip, collarbone or leg, arm or wrist. But just because you lose muscle mass does not mean it's gone forever. Older men and older women can increase muscle mass loss as a consequence of aging. Okay? This guy right here, Thomas Storer, director of exercise physiology and physical function lab at Harvard, affiliated Brigham and Women's Health Hospital. It takes work, dedication, and a plan, but it's never too late to rebuild muscle and maintain it. Now, I want to bring up one thing before we move on to the effects of hormones. It is hard to build muscle mass when you're young and healthy and you have normal hormone levels, or I should say high hormone levels at that age. It's hard. It's not easy. If you're not going to use drugs like you see professional athletes use, and part of the reason why professional athletes use so much performance-enhancing drugs is because the human body tends to reach a plateau. It's just inevitable. And the body likes to stay in that homeostasis, I'm fine right here kind of thing. And the better shape you get in, the harder it is for you to increase your fitness. It takes serious dedication and planning and nutrition and everything else, rest, to get yourself past that plateau if you're a very regular, disciplined person when it comes to training. So I want you to know that. I want to provide context because I don't want to paint a picture where you think it's somehow easy. However, I will say this. If you have been very inactive for so many years and you do start exercising, you're going to notice a lot of progress early on because you have not made progress all those years. In fact, you've lost. So you'll notice some gain. But I'm telling you, at some point, as you get more and more dedicated, you're going to find it harder and harder to improve. And we want to go over some of the factors behind this.
So when you talk about that, that's one thing I come up against all the time is like people will plateau because they will not go lift the heavier weight to basically progress.
Yes.
So that's always the biggest challenge when I work with clients. And then back to this statement here, like I've experienced this. I've had a client who was in his early 60s and he fell 3 times in 1 year. So age, you don't have to be that old to end up with these issues.
Yeah.
Just like I have a client I deal with who's in her 90s who broke her hip. And so, I mean, this thing, it doesn't matter. Everybody should be working on this stuff. And then the other thing that I have to deal with a lot is that nobody wants to load their wrists. And if you want good shoulders so that your wrists work, you got to load them somehow. And I mean, it's up to everybody to figure out what works for them. But being able to carry heavy weight, being able to load your whole entire arm without bending your elbow, like those are the biggest challenges that I feel like I come across.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, what oftentimes happens is the reason why their wrists hurt, their carpal muscles are very tight. Mm-hmm. And it is a weird kind of unnerving kind of pain that you get through here. Mm-hmm. And you got to understand, there's a lot of nerves, a lot of tendons that run through this area, right? Especially the radial nerve. You'll feel that. And I have nerve glides that I do with a lot of my students from time to time. And we really try to stretch the wrists, especially in our level 2 circuit class. Yep. We do a lot of, stuff like this. This is essentially a very simple nerve glide minus the first finger and thumb. Mm-hmm. And then we'll get in that position on all fours and try to just get a little more range of motion there before I ask people to actually put weight on their wrists. Yeah. Then it's not such a shock like, oh, that hurts my wrist. And some people just think, oh, it's arthritis. I'm going to injure myself. No, a lot of times, most of the time, it's just that bundle of tendons, muscle, nerves, not being flexible and pliable at that moment.
Yeah, but the other thing, I think that is always challenging also is in a lot of our classes, people don't like doing the body weight exercises.
Yeah, they don't.
And then there's also the challenge of, and somewhere in here, it talks about basically being able to get up off the ground. And that's kind of the basis of a lot of the classes I teach. Yeah. That is, to me, fundamental. I try to do that as much as I can with all of my students. And it's all at their own level, whatever that level is. But I think I only have 1 or 2 students who are willing to do the get up.
It is interesting you bring that up because when I was disabled for that 3 months, especially the first 2 months, very paranoid about, and my doctor was very specific about this, you could re-tear this tendon because it's healing. I'd have the brace on, and I would think when we were in public or had my crutches or the walker, I would always think, God, I'm vulnerable right now. If I fell, I don't know if I could get up. And then one day, you know what I did to calm my nerves? This was about maybe the end of the 2nd month. I was still,
hobbling.
I was still hobbling. I had the brace. I put myself on a trainer's table and I said, get your ass up. Yeah. And I did it by myself because I didn't want to freak people out if I'm swearing or making noise, right? So to my amazement, I did it. I got myself up very easily due to my upper body strength in my core and my right leg. It didn't take much. I just needed to throw this leg out to the side, get into kind of a weird, a bastardized version of the get up. And then kind of like a side plank as well. And then I found I was just able to whip myself up. And I'm like, oh my God, I could do this. And it was really contingent on, I'm sure, 5-6 weeks post-surgery. Once the pain started to really subside and I could actually do a leg lift and lift that affected leg up. So my point is, all the training I had done prior to that prepared me for post-surgery. And I was able to get up off the ground. And that was a big relief because I'm telling you, before you look at me and tell me, oh, Scott, you don't know what it's like to be old and not be able to get up off the ground. Actually, I did know for a while. Yeah. The feeling of vulnerability, especially in public, I remember thinking, God, this person could bump into me and knock me over. Yeah. And I'm stuck. And I'd never felt that ever in my life. It's believe me, I know it's a scary feeling, but you have control over that, especially if you don't have any serious injury or disability that's preventing you from using both sides of your body. You can do it. Okay, now what are some of the other things that will often pop up that's a factor in loss of muscle mass? Well, there's also the hormone factor, which you'll experience over time is several things, but I'm going to make it real simple. What you basically lose is growth hormone levels. You have something called your pituitary gland in your brain. And what happens with the pituitary gland is it just stops producing growth hormone to the same level it did when you're younger. And then one of the snowball effects of that is testosterone levels start to deplete as well. And what does that mean? it's harder for you to repair tissues. It's harder for you to rebuild actin and myosin protein, which is your connective tissue in your muscle, the protein, what we call contractile proteins that make your muscles large and strong and be able to develop a lot of tension. So hormones play a large role in that recovery. And for those of you that are saying, okay, you're mentioning testosterone and GH, well, estrogen too. Estrogen plays a role. Let me tell you something. If you don't know, estrogen plays a large role with men and women, just as testosterone plays a large role with men and women. I mean, it plays a larger role with men, but it plays a large role with women as well, because testosterone is what allows your body to recover. It allows you to rebuild tissue and also have a sense of well-being. Okay, couple things from here. Building muscle mass, like the best means to building muscle mass, no matter your age, is progressive resistance training, according to Dr. Stoyer. PRT, they call that, progressive resistance training. You'll gradually amp up your workout volume, weight, reps, sets, as your strength and endurance improve. So you start easy and you just increase. It's not too difficult to understand, although it is kind of hard to put programs together, and that's why you want to know people like Sage and I. We can help you with that. This constant challenging builds muscle and keeps you away from plateaus where you stop making gains. Remember I mentioned this earlier? This happens to professional athletes, so you know it happens to regular people, right? In fact, recent meta-analysis published in Medicine and Science and Sports and Exercise reviewed 49 studies of men ages 50 to 83 who did PRT and found that subjects averaged a 2.4 pound increase in muscle mass. That's great. Okay, next thing, protein. Now, some of you probably just kind of take this for granted. I'd say one of the biggest problems with the American diet, I think, isn't just so much too many carbohydrates, but the balance is off. The protein and the fat should be much higher than the carbohydrate consumption. And the other thing too is your quality of carbohydrate. Not all carbohydrates are equal. Brown rice is a lot healthier for you than a Cinnabon. And you have to understand that. And it has a profound effect. The Cinnabon will actually increase inflammation in your body, which leads to you losing muscle mass, whereas the brown rice will not do that.
But even the offering of brown rice versus white rice is very complicated, because I go to the grocery store and I get my sushi and I ask them, can I have brown rice?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, our supplier no longer gives us that.
Yeah.
And it's not always an option. So that's why you have to make these choices ahead of time.
True.
And pick places that give you the option of brown versus white rice.
But I would say white rice is still a better alternative than
Cinnabon, correct. But I'm just saying, like, that's the level we're having to get to, is making really good choices. I mean, we already aren't making good choices. And then how do you ask somebody to make an even better choice when the alternative wasn't even available? True.
And that's why too much pizza eating, excessive pizza eating can be bad, because the crust, let's be honest, it's a lot more bread than it is meat.
Actually, you're about to go into it. Even the choice of the protein gets really sticky when I've talked to people about.
Correct. And maybe we can shed some light on some of that. So, of course, diet plays a large role in building muscle mass. Protein is the king of muscle food. Now, keep in mind, this is a Harvard article here, all right? This isn't something we pulled out of Men's Fitness. The body breaks it down into amino acids, which it uses to build muscle. Older men often experience a phenomenon called anabolic resistance, which lowers their body's ability to break down and synthesize protein. Now, this happens to women as well. I don't know why they're just talking about men in some of these cases. Women go through this as well.
I can tell you why.
Why?
So
it's about the doctor.
In general, when it comes to studies, you will find that people do not like to study women because of all their irregularities that we have, like hormones. We're just, to them, very difficult to kind of manage, like, all the factors that kind of play into this. So they don't like doing studies on women because of this issue. And then on top of it, they just assume that because we studied it on a man, it's just going to force down into women. So that's the thing I think that is you always want to take into consideration. A lot of these studies are great because they've studied a human versus a rat, but there are differences between men and women, and so that's one good thing about whenever we talk.
Yeah.
Like Scott can give you a male perspective and I'll give you a female perspective, but that's in general why a lot of these studies you don't hear a lot about women.
Okay, so protein being very important, and this is a really interesting thing because this is something I live by as a football player, as a one-time competitive bodybuilder, but a lifetime competitive strength athlete is how I consider myself. You would always eat 1 gram to 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight. And what does that mean? So, if you only weigh 120 pounds, it's still, 220, 240, do the math for me, please. 240?
Grams?
Yeah, of protein per day. If it's 2 grams of protein per day. Now, if you
Because
stick
it's
to
75 pounds, it's 103.
Okay, I'm not talking about that if you're weighing 120 pounds.
That's what I'm saying. So it would be less than 103 grams if you're a fraction of the weight.
But I mean, if you were eating 2 grams, see now, I would always eat between 1.5 and 2 grams per pound of body weight. What they're saying here, the recommendation from this article, is 1 gram to 1.3 grams. Now, I've read articles years ago that only listed 0.5 gram to 1 gram per pound of body weight of caloric intake dedicated to protein. I think this is closer to what everyone should be, 1 gram to 1.3 grams. But again, if you're a strength athlete and you're really pushing yourself in the gym, you may want to up this to 2 grams. Okay? So for somebody like me that's 200 pounds, you're talking possibly 400 grams of protein a day being ingested. Now, I get it. That's a lot of protein. But here's the thing. I don't get all my protein from food. I have a couple protein shakes a day that will, get me close to maybe 80 grams right there or closer to 100. So keep that in mind. There's multiple ways to get your protein. So essentially, they're talking about a 175-pound man would need about 75 grams to 103 grams a day. If possible, divide your protein equally among your meals to maximize muscle protein synthesis. So here's the thing that's also good about protein. When you eat protein-rich foods, you'll feel full after you eat, especially if you include fat with that as well. And a moderate amount of carbohydrates. Oftentimes what people do is they eat a smaller amount of protein and fat and too large amount of carbohydrate, and then you're hungry 2 hours later. Okay, so what are some of the animal sources? I mean, obviously, meat, eggs, milk are considered the best. They provide the proper ratios of all the essential amino acids, yet you want to stay away from red processed meat because of high levels of saturated fat and additives. Now, I think grass-fed beef, something that's all natural, is a healthy thing to eat. I would throw that in the acceptable list here, as opposed to eating foods like red meat that is not grass-fed, that obviously would have, the influence of hormones in it because they want the cows to blow up quickly so they can hurry up, kill them, and slaughter them and make money. 3.5 ounces of lean chicken or salmon, but again, you want quality chicken and salmon. You don't want to have, chickens that were living cooped up their whole life, and you definitely don't want to be eating your salmon from an overpopulated salmon farm, right? You have Greek yogurt, skim milk, and of course beans. Don't forget about legumes. They're all very effective as well. And of course they mentioned protein powders here. 30 grams a scoop can be added. And this is what I do. I probably add more than that. I add about 42 grams per scoop. Well, yeah, not really actually. Per scoop, 22 grams. But 2 scoops together, I'm around 44 grams of protein. Can be added to all kinds of meals like oatmeal, shakes, yogurt. While food sources are the best, supplemental protein can help you if you struggle consuming enough calories and protein from your regular diet. So, like I mentioned earlier, if you're coming up short, you could consider a protein powder or supplementation of some type. Okay, also maximize muscle growth to improve recovery. They suggest consuming a drink or a meal with the carbohydrate to protein ratio of about 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 within 30 minutes after your workout. I do this all the time. I eat right after my workout, and if I don't eat right after my workout, what do? I make a protein shake. That helps me with the recovery, because think about it. When you break down all that actin and myosin connection in your muscles, that's basically protein. You need protein to help rebuild it. It's really that simple.
But one thing people don't know about your protein intake is you do straight, pure protein with very little sugar.
With water.
Right. So if you're buying a pre-made protein shake, you have to look at the grams of sugar that's in there, because just because you think, oh, I'm drinking protein, this is what I was told to do, there could be a ton of sugar in it, which is the other issue. Yeah.
So that's a good point. I take a pure protein. Now, I'm lactose intolerant, so what does that mean? I can't eat whey protein. You'll probably wonder, well, why is that? Well, they extract protein, whey protein, from cheese, which is great because it's the cheapest way to get good quality protein. The bad part is if you have lactose intolerance like I do, you're always popping a lactate pill to have a protein shake, and that is not financially feasible, and it's just too much. I save my protein pills for when I actually eat cheese or ice cream or something like that. And even my milk is lactate milk. So
which they make awesome lactate milk.
They really do. Fairlife, I think, is clearly the best. It's fully filtered. I've never had a stomach problem drinking it. Okay, so that's a good point. If you ever have any questions about what type of proteins I use a pure egg protein. It's more expensive. I'd say it's almost double the price of whey, but they give me a 2-pound bag for $28.
And that's kind of hard to find too.
That is hard to find, yeah. And I can show you how to find it.
You have to do it online.
And you have to do it in advance. The shipment's always very slow for some reason. Ever since the pandemic began, for sure. Okay, now let's move on. I think we've covered the whole idea about nutrition and what's important. Let's move on to power. Now, a lot of you think power and strength are the same thing. So, as an example of strength, let's say we're doing a wrist wrestle. Okay, that's strength. Now, let's say we're doing an explosive movement. That's power. Did you see the speed? We'll do it again, right? That's speed, that's power. Now, it isn't just moving fast, but it's moving mass quickly. Yep. So, what are some of the recommendations? Now, these guys make kind of a funny recommendation. Get up from your chair quickly, like a squat chair stand. Sang and I are more specific than that. We actually recommend things like gentle jumps. We say gentle jumps. We don't want you to pound the ground hard, but we want you to use your posterior chain, go through the actual protocol of how to jump, arm swing, loading, plantar flexion, glute hamstring activation, and then when you landing smoothly like you're landing into a squat. Just that movement is good neuromuscular training for you, and it will help improve your explosiveness. Now, I feel like I get some of this with my training. I mean, sometimes when I deadlift, I'm really pulling that weight up off the ground. Heavy dumbbell presses, I'm exploding upwards. I mean, it's strength, but it's also power as well.
And this is the base of my training, because kettlebells is nothing but power.
Yeah, and when you swing a kettlebell, that is pure power. And you're getting stability in your hips. So that's why kettlebells really offer a lot of things, that the dumbbells and the barbells don't necessarily offer. They're very unique. And you could also develop stability with kettlebells as well. So like if you have limited resources, I always recommend to people, consider kettlebells. Yep. Even though I'm not really a kettlebell fanatic myself with my training, they do have a role. Okay, now let's talk about designing that type of program. What you have to do to actually build muscle mass. What does it mean? Well, I think you should really consider some of the things that's recommended here, and we'll be a little more specific in a moment, but they might recommend 8 to 10 exercises that target all your muscle groups, sets of 12 to 15 reps, at an effort of about 5 to 7 on the 10-point scale. Now, I think 12 to 15 to me is more muscular endurance. I think at some point you should try to increase the weight and lift between 5 and 7 repetitions, even less at times. But I believe in varying that. Don't do this for a month and then do 5 to 7 for a month. No, do this on Monday. Then do 5 to 7 on another day. 8 to 10 on another day. Vary your repetitions, okay? Don't go crazy with your sets. 3 sets an exercise is plenty, okay? And they mentioned 2 to 3 workouts per week, which is good. I mean, like, if you're going to walk on the days you don't lift, 2 workouts is fine. It's adequate. Is it ideal? Yeah, I think 3 is ideal. Even 4 can be ideal, but 3 is fine. 3 is actually, if you're lifting 3 times a week, and maybe you're swimming and walking on the other days, congrats to you. You're doing a great job. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say the number of times per week is really important. I have somebody who's actually recently fallen off and hasn't done as many. And then when he asked me, how many do you do? I've tried to be on Scott's schedule. I learned early on really quickly that what happened was was 4 times a week, I actually got injured more. So, I mean, part of that could be, honestly, I just know 4 is too much for me.
Yeah.
So I go with 3.
Yeah, 3 is ideal, absolutely.
Yeah, so, but that's the thing.
And we say 3 with space in between. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I don't mean Monday through Wednesday and then take a vacation the rest of the week.
Yeah.
No, literally give yourself a day. And this is the thing. I think walking is an excellent form of cardiovascular exercise. The problem is you just want to make sure you're a proper mover.
Yeah.
That you don't have some weird movement modality that's making your hip or your knee dysfunctional. And if you are one of those people, correct your movement and maybe swim for a while or cycle for a while. In fact, the ideal thing to do is to vary all of that stuff. Hike one day, cycle on another. And if you don't feel comfortable cycling on the roads, I get it. Find a place where there isn't cars, or just get on a recumbent bike or some type of bike. Stationary bike was the word I was looking for. And the other thing is swimming is very good too. You're never going to injure yourself in a pool.
But I think the other thing like that you work on and I try to also do is all I do is I end up either dropping the weight and then just work on the actual form of a move. That's what I tend to do on my days off. And or it's a day where I do less reps.
Yeah.
So that I can focus more on the quality of what I'm doing rather than spending the time like, oh, you want me to single leg balance? I'm going to single leg balance awful, just
get my 12 reps in.
Just to like make this happen. And I often don't do that. And it doesn't, I've been in plenty of classes when they're like, okay, I want 20 reps. I'm like, I can't do that with good quality.
Do 5.
So
whatever you can do. Yeah.
Whatever I can do, I know I can do this with good quality and I'm still moving. So that's all that matters whenever I do a workout. So.
Yeah, that's a good point, Sing. And this was a really good article, Harvard Health Publishing. I'm telling you, there's all these articles like the Lancet. I think Stanford Medical has a really good publication too. Read this stuff. It's easy to disseminate and you'll just be a lot more informed and make smarter decisions for yourself. There's the old doctor there. Looks like a young man.
I don't know if that's the doctor.
Let's just assume he is. He's got the bro stash, so he definitely was running around in the 70s. Okay, where do we go now?
Okay, so we actually have a lot here.
I'm going to let you cover this part.
I'm going to try to jam through it as fast as I can because I know we're up on time.
Yeah, we're getting over here.
So, only thing I have to say, even the FDA is studying this kind of stuff. And the one thing, the FDA actually interviewed quite a few people and just kind of went through their history, which is down below. But basically, there's currently no FDA-approved medication for the treatment of sarcopenia. So, you gotta maintain your diet and you gotta exercise. Those are the only options for sarcopenia. And then if you read, it's an 18-page essay, but you can read about these different people that they fell into 4 different buckets of what they preferred to do, and a lot of them were in their 80s. So I know as much as people want to tell me, but you don't understand, I'm this and this age. Okay, fine. Here's the study for somebody who's in their 80s, if that's your concern. And then there's another one that I'll drop in there that talks about sarcopenia, and then it basically talks about how, there's chronic illness, there's fatty infiltration, poor nutrition, also how this affects like mitochondrial decline, and let's see what else is in there.
Yeah, that's all really important, relevant information. Knowing how to take care of your muscle mass, I'm telling you, is the key in all this. And one little thing I want to say in here, so you could finish up with this article. A lot of people are getting what we call hormone replacement therapy, much like what women get with progesterone and estrogen. Men get testosterone, and even women get some of that treatment as well. Why does one do it? Well, there's a lot of basis for it, because for some people, they start experiencing lower levels of testosterone. It affects your ability to recover from workouts. Libido may decrease a lot, and your general sense of well-being may start to decrease as well. You don't have as much energy. So there is a place for hormone replacement therapy. But what we're talking about when we say HRT or TRT, hormone replacement therapy, we're talking a very moderate dose. We're not talking the dose that a professional athlete would use to, perform at a really high level. And people have actually asked me about this quite a bit over the years. Have you ever done steroids? And I'm very honest with everyone. I've never done any steroids, even when I was my absolute strongest. I considered it a couple times, but I never did. As I got older and I made more and more progress physically, I realized, it's a good thing I didn't do that, because I think when I would really consider using steroids, it would be when I'm older, when I'm 70 or 80 years old, probably more like 80, and I could really see it's just getting so much harder for me to maintain or increase muscle mass and strength. I would definitely consider it, because how many more years do I have on the earth at that point? Let's be realistic. I'm 80 years old.
Yeah.
90? That would be 10 more years. 95 if I'm very lucky, like both our fathers. 15 years. A lot of the long-term side effects of steroids are within that period. Now, I've heard a lot of doctors say there's a reason why hormone levels deplete as we get much older. There's a reason. They don't exactly know why. It could lead to health problems. Yeah, there's a risk, but I would weigh the quality of life aspect of that.
Well, and that's the thing, even though we talk about it all the time, people go on their medications, the thing about going on hormone therapy is once your body's used to that,
you have to stay on it.
You have to stay on it. So there's no going back.
Very good point.
So that's a serious decision to have to make. And I've had, actually, one of my clients' children has made that decision. He made that decision in his 30s. So that is a lifetime. And
it is. And a lot of professional athletes, especially strength, that world's strongest men, or power lifters, bodybuilders especially, even some football players that took it on a regular basis, if they took that all through their 20s and 30s, I guarantee you they can't come off. They're going to be on TRT, what we call hormone replacement therapy, for the rest of their lives. And that's the thing. If you keep that level acceptable, and I don't know exactly what it is. It may be 800 milligrams of testosterone or 1 gram. I don't know. I've never been a guy that was a chemistry set, injected myself with stuff. I don't know. Somewhere around there, I would guess, would be for somebody that's a larger person. Less for somebody who's probably smaller, or whatever your expected level should be for your age. They try to give you that plus a little bit more. And that's the idea behind it. But see, here's the thing. When you start that type of therapy at 70 or 80 years old, I think you're going to have a lot more success with it, as if rather than coming off of hard levels, high doses of testosterone and God knows what else these guys take, IGF-1 and GH, and now you're just limiting that person to that 1 gram of testosterone the rest of their life, there could be some risk to that. But I want to say this. I think in the media, mainstream media, has a tendency to sort of overblow the deadly side effects of steroid use. I'm not saying it isn't dangerous. It is, and partly why it is so dangerous. These athletes kind of do their own thing. They they go beyond whatever the doctor writes them a prescription for, and now you're venturing out into the unknown. And yeah, so a lot of these things you've seen, when you are running extreme high levels of any hormone in your body, especially testosterone, your body will be so good at repairing and growing that if cancer's there or something like that, it'll make that
growing.
That's true. It'll make that grow too. And for people that did like way too many years of growth hormone, like you see these Eastern Bloc athletes, especially the women, in the men too, you'll start to see the foreheads growing out. They just look like these weird humanoid type, figures that just are hard to look at sometimes. And that's the result of abuse. And I'm not suggesting anything. You talk to your doctor about what you think you need to do. But people have asked me over the years, what do I think of testosterone replacement therapy? And I feel even stronger now, being 51 years old. I wouldn't consider something like this until I'm much older. And because I did not spend my 20s and 30s using high levels of or any type of steroid, I feel like my testosterone levels are probably pretty high for my age. I've never had them tested, but you would probably say I'm higher than average, huh? Yeah.
Okay, so let's head back.
Yeah.
We're going to head back to Medscape, where there's a doctor, and he's in his 80s, who talks about what he does in order to combat sarcopenia. So it's all the way down here. So he talks about everything we've talked about so far. The only thing that he brought up was a creatine supplement.
Yeah, I'm a little sketch on that.
Yeah, I've actually looked into this. I actually took a test and the number that they gave me to supplement is so small that any supplement I bought would be over supplementation. So I don't know, that could go one of two ways, either down the toilet or cause a lot of other issues. And then there's the whole vitamin D, which we did not get into earlier. But that's very specific to the person too. Yeah,
you have to have your blood tested for that to really know what the ideal amount is. Because like we mentioned before, excessive levels of vitamin D can make you really stiff and tight.
It made me really stiff.
Yeah. One thing I want to say too about this, some of you probably look at this growth hormone supplements, testosterone supplements, which I'm assuming is growth hormone therapy and testosterone therapy. They're not very specific. We clicked on the 5 there and it didn't really say much.
Well, those numbers are basically from studies.
They're footnotes, yeah. So what I'm trying to tell you is a lot of you are already on a lot of medication. Think about the risk of statin drugs, because what statins do over time is they erode your muscle.
Yeah.
So think about that for a second. If you don't have to be on a statin drug, get off of it. If you have to be on it, well, then I don't know what to tell you. You're going to have to really work hard to maintain your muscle mass. And some people don't experience that rapid decline from statins, but a lot of people do. And, it's not so outside the lines to consider hormone replacement therapy if you have lost a lot of muscle mass, because they're giving you drugs all the time, your doctor. Try to get off of those drugs, whether it's blood pressure med, whatever it is. I'm not saying get off of it without changing your health.
Right. Get
your blood pressure down low by doing a lot of cardiovascular exercises and really increasing your fitness. So you don't need these things, and have a better diet, and the exercise, the building of muscle mass, it helps with glucose uptake. All of this stuff will bring down your LDL, your low density lipoprotein, which is the bad cholesterol. You get that lower, then there's not really going to be any reason for you to be on a statin drug. And you should always just ask questions, please. When you go to your doctor, ask questions. Ask your doctor, well, how long do I need to be on this? What do I have to do to get off of this? Ask. Because if you don't, they're just going to write you a script and that's it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I actually had a client who just got his first statin prescription. And that is the conversation. I'm like, well, you have to do it because your numbers are so bad now. Like there's nothing like we can do to change that instantaneously. However, over time, you take it for a year or 2 years, what have you, but you really need to find a program that works for you. I mean, and that might, for him specifically, I know he needs to work on the mental health part to basically reprioritize everything, because he's working so hard to like manage the food and everything, but unfortunately there's some other things in the diet that don't work out. So,
Yeah. Such
yeah.
is the case with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's the thing. You have to make the call. If you take the statin, you have the potential of losing muscle, which then turns into all this other stuff that we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
So the other thing I like, he's 85 years old. He talks about his average steps being 6,500, so 6,500 steps per day. And then what's great is he has this nice mix of cardio, balance, walking backwards, hand-eye coordination, stretching, yoga, and he's very specific on these moves, and these are the things like, he's 85. I have 70-year-olds who complain about most of these exercises. But he adds it. He says Cobra, which is very difficult, I think. Plank, lunges. Scott and I went back and forth on crunches and resistance training. So I thought that was great for somebody who was 85.
Yeah, I think it's fabulous.
That's
yeah.
impressive. Good for him. And then the last is basically this MedBridge article, which MedBridge is, if you've ever, I know for sure, if you go to Kaiser and they give you exercises, they use this whole MedBridge system. So this is basically for rehab, where somebody talks about the difference in, so earlier we talked about power, and here we're talking about the types of muscles that are used in that power. So these type 2 muscle fibers for high force and power output. So this is something I would love to do in my classes. It's been interesting.
Yeah, no doubt.
I would love to do a lot more of it, even if I'm the one doing it.
Yeah.
Yep, so there we go. So one of the interventions, first thing is power training. So concentric high velocity contractions, especially with respect to the activities of daily living. Once again, vitamin D, strength training, endurance training, which we have not talked about. And then
We actually did walking, cycling. That's endurance training.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think everyone's pretty well versed if they're watching our podcast religiously on this stuff.
Okay,
So, anything
that's pretty
else?
much it.
Yeah. We're going to wrap things up now. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. It gets us in the algorithm, allows us to build a broader audience, which is our goal here. Also, we probably won't have a podcast next week because we're celebrating your birthday.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be in Monterey. So yeah, we're going to enjoy ourselves, enjoy yourselves. We're probably going to drop this podcast to you in the middle of the week. And then we'll get back to you maybe 2 weeks later. Okay? All right, everyone, have a great weekend. If you want to leave a comment, please do so. Take care.